This video was brought to you by Henson Shaving. We're just a couple of days away from the US presidential election, and the polls are ridiculously tight. Because while Kamala Harris's national lead has shrunk a fair bit, she's still very much in the race, and both candidates are essentially a margin of error away from an electoral college landslide. So in this video, we're going to take one last look at the polls, and try our best to explain why the bookies have Trump as the slight favourite, even if the polls are neck and neck. If you want more of our very best reporting on the US election, then consider buying a copy of our magazine, Too Long. Our 2024 election special will run you through the results of not only the US election, but also tons more from around the world. Buy a copy or learn more by clicking the link in the description. So let's just get straight into the latest polls. As of Friday morning, most of the well-regarded poll aggregators had the race as essentially a toss-up. Nate Silver's forecast, for instance, had Harris with a 1.1 point national lead, at 48.5% to Trump's 47.4%. While this does represent a pretty dramatic decline from the roughly 3-point lead that Harris enjoyed in early October, because her polls have held up relatively well in the all-important swing states, Silver's forecast still gives her a 44.2% chance of winning the Electoral College, down about 10 points from early October, when she had a roughly 55% chance of winning. The 538 aggregator also has Trump slightly ahead in the Electoral College. 538 currently gives Harris a 1.2 point lead in the national polls, with Harris on 47.9% and Trump on 46.8%. This also makes Trump the slight favourite to win the Electoral College, according to 538's model, which currently gives Trump a 53% chance of winning the election. The Economist forecast, meanwhile, is slightly more bullish for Harris. It currently gives her a 1.5 point lead over Trump, with Harris on 49% and Trump on 47.5%. This translates to a 50% chance of winning the Electoral College, although Harris has the teensiest of edges. Interestingly, this is both because The Economist gives Harris a healthier lead at the national level, but also because they give her a good chance of winning North Carolina, which could save her if she loses Pennsylvania. All in all, the polls basically say that the race is a toss-up that could very easily go either way. While Trump has the slightest of edges, it's important to remember that a 53 or 55% chance of winning is still a very minimal advantage, and it's functionally the same as a coin toss. However, the betting markets give Trump a much more substantial advantage. Polymarket, the crypto-based betting market that's become increasingly popular over this election cycle, currently gives Trump a 61% chance of winning, although that's down slightly from a couple of days ago when its odds peaked at 67%. Kalshi, a less popular but legal betting market, currently gives Trump a 56% chance of winning, although again, that's down from a peak of 64% a few days ago. Predictit, one of the original betting markets, gives Trump an implied chance of winning the Electoral College of about 54%. Meanwhile, the old school bookies also have Trump as the slight favourite. Most of the big betting sites give Trump a 60% chance of winning. Bet365, for example, gives Trump 8 to 13 odds, which implies a 62% chance of him winning, while Sky Bet gives him 8 to 15, which implies a 65% chance of a Trump victory. In summary then, the betting markets generally give Trump a nearly 2/3 chance of winning, while the polls have it as a 50-50 toss-up. So what explains the discrepancy between the polls and the bookies? Well, we can see at least two reasons. Now, the first is that in previous presidential elections, Trump has outperformed the polls. In 2016, for instance, the forecasters gave Hillary Clinton at least a 90% chance of winning the Electoral College, and most pollsters thought that she'd win the national vote by about 4 points. In the end, as you probably know, Clinton only won the popular vote by about 2 points, a 2-point underperformance, and Trump won the Electoral College, thanks to especially strong performances in swing states like Florida, Iowa, Ohio, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. In 2020, the pollsters were even more bullish about Biden's chances, with both 270 to win and Real Clear Politics giving the former VP a 7.4-point lead over Trump at the national level. In the end, Biden only won by about 4.5 points, a nearly 3-point underperformance, and only eked out an Electoral College victory thanks to narrow victories in Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. To give you a sense of quite how narrow Biden's victory was, consider the fact that if just 43,000 voters in these 3 swing states had gone the other way, representing just 0.03% of the voting public, then Trump would have won. Anyway, given that Harris has less than a 2-point lead nationally, if Trump outperforms the polls like he did in 2016 or 2020, then he could win both the popular vote and an enormous electoral college majority, including probably every swing state. Now, we should stress that this is by no means guaranteed. Pollsters have updated their methodologies in an attempt to account for their mistakes in 2016 and 2020. And in the 2022 midterms, the pollsters actually underestimated the Democrats. In fact, if the pollsters made the same mistakes they made in 2022, then according to analysis by the New York Times, Harris would win every swing state except for Georgia, giving her more than 300 electoral college votes. This is what makes the election so nail-biting. The polls are currently close enough that both candidates are about a margin of error away from a blowout. Anyway, aside from the fact that Trump has historically outperformed the polls, the other reason that the bookies might be more bullish on Trump than the pollsters is early voting data. As we mentioned in previous videos, you shouldn't infer too much from early voting data, because it's hard to compare to 2020, when there was a pandemic ongoing, and Trump was telling his supporters that early voting and mail-in voting were essentially a scam. While we broadly stand by this advice, there is one state where early voting data is at least more informative than the others, and that's Nevada. This is largely because most voting in Nevada is done early. Something like 90% of the vote was cast early in 2020, and roughly 80% of the vote was cast early in 2022. And here, things don't look that great for the Democrats. Thanks to impressive turnout in Republican-leaning rural areas, Republicans currently have a 5-point lead in the state, with roughly half of all votes already cast. Now, Democrats can still win if independents turn out in higher than usual numbers and break hard for the Democrats. And the fact that minorities and young voters are turning out in higher numbers than they did in 2020 does bode well for Democrats. Nonetheless, according to John Ralston of the Nevada Independent, who has a pretty good track record making predictions from early voting data in Nevada, Democrats are currently facing an uphill struggle, and Republicans are probably the favorites at the moment. While Nevada is unlikely to make or break the election, given that it only has 6 electoral college votes, the fact that Republicans are ahead in a state that the pollsters basically had as evens has made the bookies even more bullish on Trump. Regardless, once they come in, the results of the US election are likely to be razor thin. Speaking of which, you should check out Henson Shaving. If you're sick of the gimmicks that other shaving brands use, the subscriptions, moisturizing strips, lasers, whatever, then you'll want to check out Henson. Because, and here's the dirty secret about the razor industry, even the cheapest dollar store disposable razor will likely give you a reasonably good shave. The challenge is the impact they'll have on your skin. So to protect your skin while shaving, you need to actually support the blade properly. And Henson can provide that quality shave, even with cheap blades, thanks to the Henson razor, which they produce at their aerospace machine shop, which has also produced parts for the ISS, and which perfectly holds blades at a 30-degree angle, and extends them only 0.0013 inches, less than the width of a human hair. In classic TLDR style, that's important for 3 reasons. Firstly, it's way cheaper. Those fancy blade cartridges aren't necessarily designed to provide a better experience for shaving. They're about jacking up prices. Instead, Henson's razor takes standard razor blades that cost just 10 cents each, meaning that while the initial handle might be more expensive, in the long run, you'll save a ton of cash. Secondly, it's far better for the environment to be using individual blades rather than joining the 2 billion razor cartridges thrown away every year in the US alone, with Henson's products containing no plastic at all, even in their packaging. Finally, this superb engineering and precise blade tech just provides an incredible shave. If you want to try it out, click the link in the description, then add a razor and 100 blades to your cart. Once you've done that, use our discount code TLDR at checkout, and you'll get all of those blades totally free.